The uniting church throughout Australia is called together to worship, witness and serve in response to the gospel of Christ. We do so recognising that the first peoples had encountered the Creator God before the arrival of the colonists, and that the Spirit was already in this land, revealing God to people through law, custom and ceremony. We celebrate and seek to honour the journey of walking in covenant with the uniting Aboriginal and Islander Christian Congress. The worship, witness and service of the church is expressed primarily through the life of local communities of faith and the work of chaplains, agencies and various institutions established by the church in love and service. As recognised in the earlier work of Act 2, local communities of faith are places of life. Places where life is found, lives are transformed, and life is so abundant that it overflows into the community in which it shares in mission. The church is structured to allow for clear expressions of worship, witness and service. The church is governed by councils that provide oversight, encouragement and support. We believe that Christ can speak through any and all of the interrelated councils of the church. The basis of union highlights how each council has its own responsibilities. Councils are called to give heed to one another so that the whole church stays united, working together humbly in the service of the gospel. The precise way of structuring the church isn't set in concrete. The basis of union calls us to keep the church's law under constant review, so that its life may increasingly be directed to the service of God and humanity, and its worship to the true and faithful setting forth of and response to the gospel of Christ. As we look at our ways of working, we need to be careful that we are not placing unnecessary burdens on particular people or groups, and avoid entrenching inequalities in how resources are distributed. We currently find ourselves in a kairos moment. It's a once-in-a-generation opportunity to review the shape of our structures, including presbyteries, assembly and synods, and how they help us in our response to God's call. Presbyteries have a particular role in the oversight of the life and mission of the church in the areas committed to them, stimulating and encouraging communities of faith and enabling engagement in the wider work of the church. Over the last few years, there's been a big focus on discerning the appropriate boundaries and resourcing for the presbyteries, geographically based or otherwise, to best fulfil those responsibilities in vastly different places and spaces around Australia. Ensuring adequate and equitable resourcing across Australia is a key part of the work of the Commission for Governance, Resourcing and Administration. At a national level, the Assembly has overall responsibility for the national identity, policies, advocacy and relationships of the Church. The 6 synods currently have responsibility for the general oversight, direction and administration of the Church within their bounds, overseeing areas like finance, property, risk and compliance. Synods are mostly state-based, though they are not all limited to state boundaries. The Commission is now in the process of refining renewed council models to be considered at the 17th Assembly in mid-2027. In exploring 3 council and 4 council models at the request of the last Assembly, we are building on the listening phases of Act 2, being informed by the changes to presbyteries that some synods have made or are considering, and recognising the ways that powers have been transferred between councils in other synods. A 3-council model would see responsibilities for missional direction, property, and some relationships with agencies move to presbyteries, or in some cases joint committees of presbyteries suitably resourced. Administrative responsibilities would be managed by appointed boards, potentially overseen broadly by the Assembly. Presbyteries would have greater influence over the missional directions of their regions as they support the ministry and mission of local communities of faith. Discernment roles would belong to councils, including the local church councils, presbyteries and the Assembly. A renewed 4-council model would still recognise the significant roles for presbyteries in setting strategic direction and enable synods to oversee shared functions, including relationships with agencies and other institutions, as well as managing other administrative and pastoral matters, with potentially smaller meetings of synods required. For either model, we've heard clearly from the listening phase the importance of clarity in the responsibilities and accountabilities of the councils, without excessive double handling of matters important to the life of communities of faith. Over the next 2 months, we are collaborating with leaders from across the presbyteries and synods of the Church to refine the models ahead of testing them against the feasibility, opportunities, consequences, and risks of their implementation. We are consulting with leaders from the Uniting Aboriginal and Islander Christian Congress and with leadership from amongst the agencies as we work towards having clear alternatives to bring to the 17th Assembly for that Council's discernment. We are driven by the joy of the gospel, by the celebration of the life that is expressed in local communities of faith and in the work of chaplains, agencies and institutions of the Church, and by the confidence that through addressing some of the inequalities and burdens being experienced in the Church across Australia, we will be freer to respond to God's call in ministry and mission in the communities in which we share. As leaders from among your presbyteries and synods engage in this work, along with members of this commission, please continue to uphold us in prayer. Please stay tuned for opportunities to join in prayer together, that we may respond faithfully to God's call to enter more fully into mission.